The Courageous was humanity's pride, a warship like no other, the flagship of the United Earth Forces. Commanded by Captain Elora Quinn, it was a symbol of hope, strength, and resilience, a reminder to the Cyros that humans would never surrender. For years, Earth had been fighting to survive against the Cyros, a ruthless alien alliance whose fleets were technologically superior, capable of wiping out entire colonies with ease. The tide of war had long been turning in favor of the Cyros, and now humanity's last stronghold was hanging by a thread. Each battle brought more casualties, more devastation, but the Courageous and its crew were determined to push back. They had been through countless battles, and although the enemy outnumbered them, the humans fought with something the Cyros couldn't understand: resilience. The battle had been fierce, with the Courageous standing tall against a fleet of Cyros warships near the outer reaches of the system. The war was nearing its breaking point, with both sides locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Suddenly, just as it seemed the Courageous might gain the upper hand, something unexplainable happened. A blinding flash of light engulfed the ship. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a weapon discharge. It was as if the Courageous itself had simply ceased to exist. The Cyros ship stopped firing, and for a brief moment, the galaxy stood still. The Courageous was gone. No debris, no signs of destruction, just nothingness. The communications channels went dead, and the fleet was left in shock. Nearby ships, the allies who had been fighting alongside the Courageous, scrambled to make sense of what had just occurred. Their sensors, which had been tracking the Courageous with meticulous precision, now displayed empty space where the warship had once been. Even the Cyros, who'd always been confident in their technology, were momentarily disoriented. The Courageous was gone. The hope they represented, the tactical genius of Captain Elora Quinn, the incredible might of their advanced weaponry, all of it had vanished in an instant. The Cyros declared victory without hesitation, seeing this sudden disappearance as a sign that humanity had lost its last bastion. The remaining human ships retreated, their morale shattered, and Earth's defenses were now completely exposed. Back on Earth, the loss of the Courageous hit hard. The ship had been more than just a vessel. It had been a symbol of resistance, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. As reports came in, the families of the crew members were devastated. News outlets reported the destruction in grim detail, the loss of such an incredible warship a final blow to humanity's struggle. The Courageous had been humanity's greatest hope, and now that hope had vanished, leaving only despair in its wake. Captain Elora Quinn, however, did not go quietly into that dark night. Her last transmission, received mere moments before the ship disappeared, sent a chill down the spines of everyone who heard it. It was brief, cryptic, and haunting. "We are not alone," Captain Quinn had said, her voice filled with an emotion no one could place. The message cut off abruptly, leaving behind more questions than answers. What did she mean? Was she speaking of the Cyros, or something else? The transmission offered no explanation, no context. It left a lingering, unsettling feeling in the air. And it was the last anyone heard from the Courageous. In the wake of the disappearance, the Resistance, a loose network of human fighters still holding out in the farthest reaches of space, began to whisper of strange things. Some believed Captain Quinn's final words were not just the ramblings of a doomed commander, but a message, perhaps a sign of something greater. A handful of reports from survivors on nearby ships spoke of flashes of light, strange energy waves, and anomalies in space just before the Courageous vanished. Some even claimed to have seen something massive shapes moving just beyond the nebula, beyond human reach. Of course, most dismissed these reports as the result of panic and fear, mere figments of imagination. But in the hidden corners of the Resistance, where hope was as fragile as it was precious, whispers grew louder. There were rumors that the Courageous had not been destroyed at all, but had been taken somewhere far beyond the known reaches of the galaxy. Some believed that the ship had been drawn into an unknown dimension, and that Captain Quinn and her crew were still alive, somewhere out there waiting for the right moment to return. They clung to the cryptic message, "We are not alone." As weeks turned into months, humanity's situation grew more desperate. The Cyros conquest of the galaxy continued, and Earth was on the brink of falling. Yet, In the shadow of the loss of the courageous, there was a flicker of hope, a belief that Captain Quinn's words held a deeper meaning. The Resistance, ever resourceful, began searching for any clue, any trace that could confirm their suspicions. They scoured old data logs, examined ancient records, and followed every lead. Some of the most brilliant minds of humanity worked tirelessly to decode the meaning behind the last transmission, to unlock the mystery of the ship's disappearance. Then, one day, a breakthrough came. An obscure transmission from a deep space observatory picked up a faint, cryptic signal. It was a frequency humanity had not used in decades, a frequency Captain Quinn's crew had once broadcasted on. The signal wasn't strong, but it was unmistakable. It was a call for help, faint but clear, and it contained coordinates. The coordinates led to a remote sector of space, far from the reach of the Cyros, a region that was considered uncharted. Could this be the courageous? Could Captain Quinn and her crew still be out there, somewhere beyond the stars? The idea that the courageous might return with answers, perhaps even with new allies, spread like wildfire. The Resistance began to rally behind the signal, hoping that, just perhaps, humanity's greatest ship was not lost forever. In the corridors of Earth's command center, the mood was one of anxious anticipation. Was the courageous gone for good? Or was there still hope, faint, though it may be that humanity could rise again? The rumors, the cryptic message, and the faint signal were enough to reignite the flickering flame of resistance. The whispers grew louder, and once again, hope surged through the hearts of those who had been ready to give up. The battle was not over. Not yet. And so, the question hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. Where had the courageous gone, and what had they discovered in the dark void of space? Would humanity find their way back to the stars, or would they be swallowed by the endless night? Months had passed since the courageous vanished, and the war between humanity and the Cyros had grown darker with each passing day. The Cyros, now armed with the full might of their superior technology, pushed deeper into human space, effortlessly crushing the last remnants of resistance. Colonies fell one after another, and Earth's defenses were on the brink of collapse. The once powerful united Earth forces were now scattered and in disarray. Morale had hit rock bottom. Humanity, battered and beaten, was on the verge of surrendering to the overwhelming power of the Cyros. The lights of hope had all but gone out, and the universe seemed like a place of darkness and despair. But even in the deepest pit of hopelessness, fate has a way of surprising those who least expect it was at this moment, when all seemed lost, that a faint, mysterious signal was detected. The signal came from a remote, isolated deep space research station located in the far reaches of the galaxy, far beyond the range of any major spacefaring power. The scientists aboard the station, who had been studying space anomalies for years, had no idea what they were about to uncover. At first, the signal was barely noticeable, weak, distorted, and nearly impossible to trace, but as they fine-tuned their instruments, the signal grew stronger. Then, they heard it, a voice. The unmistakable voice of Captain Elara Quinn. The scientists gasped in shock. It was her. There was no mistaking it. But the message she sent wasn't like the cryptic transmission they had received months ago, just before the courageous disappeared. This time, the voice was clearer, more confident, as if Captain Quinn had returned from a place far beyond the stars. The words she spoke sent a chill down their spines. "We've returned. With allies you cannot imagine." The transmission was brief, but the implications were staggering. The voice spoke of the courageous, of its crew, and of something far more extraordinary. They had found something, someone out there. They weren't alone. The signal crackled with energy, and the last words faded into the silence of space, leaving the researchers stunned and speechless. What did it mean? Who were these allies? And why had the courageous and its crew been so silent for so long? The questions swirled in their minds, but one thing was certain: this wasn't a distress signal. This was a message of hope, a beacon in the darkness. The message also contained something else: coordinates. Coordinates that pointed to a remote, uncharted system on the edge of known space, far from the reach of both the Cyros and Earth's remaining forces. The station scientists quickly confirmed the location and realized the gravity of what they had discovered. It was a place no one had ever visited, a system that lay hidden from all known star maps. No one had ever dared to explore it, not because it was dangerous, but because it was forgotten. And now, the message from Captain Quinn was leading them there. But what could they possibly find? Were the Courageous and its crew really alive? Were they truly working with these mysterious allies? And most importantly, could these allies turn the tide of the war? The news of the signal spread like wildfire across the remaining human factions. Hope began to flicker back to life, and the Resistance, once a scattered and disorganized group, quickly found a renewed sense of purpose. Commander Alex Rowe, a seasoned leader with a sharp mind and a reputation for getting things done, was selected to lead a team of elite operatives to investigate. They would be the first to follow the coordinates to the uncharted system, and they had one mission: to find out what had happened to the Courageous and its crew, and if possible, bring their new allies back to Earth. Commander Rowe assembled his team, skilled soldiers, engineers, and scientists who had all been waiting for something, anything, to hold on to. Among them was Dr. Isabel Hargrove, a brilliant physicist who had worked on the research station when the signal was first detected. She was convinced that the signal was no coincidence, that it was the result of something far beyond human understanding. She, more than anyone, believed that the message was proof that humanity's future wasn't as bleak as it seemed. The team set out with urgency, preparing their ship, the Vanguard, for the journey to the coordinates. The journey to the uncharted system was long and perilous. The farther they traveled into the unknown, the more they felt the weight of the universe pressing down on them. Deep space was full of mysteries, and as they crossed the threshold into uncharted territory, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. But despite the tension, there was a growing sense of excitement among them. For the first time in months, they felt like they had a purpose again. They weren't just running from the Cyros, they were chasing something, a glimmer of hope. Days turned into weeks as they ventured farther from known space, following the cryptic signal. The system they were approaching was like nothing they had ever seen. It was surrounded by a strange energy field that distorted space-time itself. It wasn't a natural phenomenon, but something deliberately placed, perhaps by the Courageous itself or by the mysterious allies the message spoke of. The closer they got to the system's heart, the more they realized they were not just exploring an uncharted star system. They were walking into a mystery that could change the entire course of the war, and possibly the future of humanity itself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the team arrived at the coordinates. What they found was beyond anything they could have imagined. There, nestled in the heart of the system, was the Courageous. But it wasn't just the ship. Surrounding it was a fleet of vessels, strange and unlike anything humanity had ever built. These ships were massive, sleek, and unlike anything the Cyros or the humans had ever seen. They were advanced beyond comprehension, built with technology that seemed to defy the laws of physics. And standing at the helm of the Courageous was Captain Elora Quinn, alive and well, looking more determined than ever. But it wasn't just Captain Quinn and the Courageous. As the team landed, they were greeted by beings unlike anything they had encountered before, tall, radiant figures with an air of ancient wisdom about them. These were the allies Captain Quinn had spoken of. They were not human, but they were not the Cyros either. Their presence was overwhelming, and it was clear that they were far older and more powerful than any race the humans had ever known. They were the Etherians, a race that had been watching humanity for centuries, waiting for the right moment to intervene. And now, that moment had come. ASS Commander Rowe and his team stood before Captain Quinn and the Etherians. It was clear that humanity's destiny had just taken a dramatic turn. The war was far from over, but with these powerful new allies, humanity had a fighting chance. The real battle, it seemed, was just beginning. When Commander Alex Rowe and his team finally arrived at the coordinates, they were prepared for something extraordinary. What they found, however, was beyond anything they had imagined. The coordinates had led them to the heart of a dense nebula, a swirling mass of cosmic dust and gas that blocked out the light of nearby stars. The region was silent, foreboding, and unlike anything they had ever encountered before. As their ship, the Vanguard, cautiously navigated through the nebula, their scanners began to pick up something massive, something impossible. Through the swirling clouds of dust and gas, the Courageous reappeared, but it was not as they had left it. The once proud warship was now an awe-inspiring sight. The ship was upgraded, its surface glimmering with strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dark expanse. It had been transformed, as if it had been touched by something far beyond human understanding. But it wasn't just the Courageous that stunned them. Surrounding the ship was an entire fleet of massive warships. These ships were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They were sleek, powerful, and intimidating, with designs that defied conventional human engineering. The ships seemed to pulse with energy, their hulls shimmering with an otherworldly light. Each vessel was far more advanced than any human ship, and the sheer scale of the fleet was staggering. The ships were not just a display of raw power, they exuded an aura of ancient intelligence, of something far older and wiser than humanity. The team stood in stunned silence as they approached the fleet, their minds racing with questions. Who were these ships? Where had they come from? And what did this mean for humanity's future? As they docked with the Courageous, the truth began to unfold. Captain Elora Quinn, once thought to be lost forever, stood at the helm of the ship. She was the same, yet different. Her expression was steely and resolute, but there was something new in her eyes and understanding, a wisdom that had not been there before. She greeted Commander Rowe and his team with a calm that belied the enormity of what had happened. The Courageous had not been destroyed, as they had feared. It had been taken, drawn into a dimension beyond the known universe, a place where the fabric of reality was stretched and distorted. There, Captain Quinn and her crew had encountered something that had changed everything. The beings they had encountered were unlike anything humanity had ever known. These beings were called the Etherians. Ancient and enigmatic, the Etherians had been watching humanity for centuries, observing their growth and their struggles. They had seen humanity's potential, the spark of something greater, even in the darkest times. The Etherians had known that humanity's path was fraught with danger, but they also saw the strength within the human race strength that could rise above even the most overwhelming odds. And so, when the Courageous and its crew had been drawn into their realm, the Etherians had decided to intervene. They had given the Courageous and its crew a gift: advanced technology, knowledge of the stars, and the power to fight back against the Cyros and any other threat that might come their way. The technology that the Etherians had shared was unlike anything humanity had ever dreamed of. Ships, weapons, and systems that were beyond even the most advanced human understanding had been placed at their disposal. But it wasn't just technology. The Etherians had shared something more valuable: their knowledge. They had taught Captain Quinn and her crew how to tap into the vast, untapped potential of the universe. They had unlocked secrets of space travel, energy manipulation, and the very fabric of reality itself. It was knowledge that would allow humanity to stand toe-to-toe with any galactic power, no matter how advanced. But even with all this power, Captain Quinn and her crew knew that this was only the beginning. The war against the Cyros was not just a fight for survival. It was part of something much larger. Captain Quinn's voice broke the silence as she explained the gravity of the situation. The Cyros, she said, her tone somber, are not just invaders. They are part of a much larger empire, one that spans across the galaxy and beyond. The Cyros are the foot soldiers of a greater power, a galactic empire that has its sights set on humanity. The war you've been fighting, it's only the first phase. They are testing humanity's strength, seeing if we are a worthy adversary. But what they don't know is that we have more than just weapons now. We have allies, powerful allies. Her words hung in the air, a weighty promise and a dire warning all at once. The Etherians are just the beginning. They have awakened because they see the potential in humanity. But we are not the only ones who have been watched. The galactic empire that the Cyros serve has been observing us as well, and they will not stop until they have wiped us out. We must be ready for what comes next. The news was overwhelming. The team had come here seeking answers, and now they were faced with a revelation that would change everything they had known. The Cyros were not simply an external threat. They were part of a much larger, much more dangerous force. And humanity had just entered the game, whether it was ready or not. But there was no time to dwell on the enormity of the situation. The team knew that the knowledge and power they had gained from the Etherians was their only chance. The Courageous was no longer just a symbol of hope, it was now a weapon, a catalyst for change. And with the advanced fleet at their disposal, humanity had a fighting chance against the Cyros and whatever larger empire lay beyond them. Commander Rowe and his team left the Courageous with a sense of purpose that they had not felt in months. They were no longer just a group of survivors trying to hold on. They were the vanguard of a new era for humanity. The battle had changed, the stakes had been raised, and the future of the human race hung in the balance. But for the first time in a long while, they were not facing it alone. The Etherians, with their ancient wisdom and unimaginable power, had made their choice. They had decided that humanity was worth fighting for. And now, armed with knowledge and allies beyond their understanding, humanity was ready to fight back. The war was far from over. It was only just beginning. With the power of the Etherians behind them, humanity embarked on a bold counteroffensive that would change the course of the war. The Courageous, now transformed into a near-mythical vessel of unimaginable power, led the charge, its advanced weaponry and upgrades making it an unstoppable force. The new fleet, forged with the Etherians' technology, was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Each ship was a marvel of design and power, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of the human spirit. The Etherians had shared their most advanced secrets, including the art of dimensional warfare, a technology that allowed human ships to phase in and out of different dimensions, making them nearly impossible to target or predict. This technological edge, combined with humanity's relentless resourcefulness, took the Cyros completely by surprise. The first few skirmishes were a brutal shock to the Cyros. They had expected to crush humanity with ease, as they had done for months, but the human forces fought with an intensity and brilliance that they had never anticipated. Ships that once seemed fragile and outmatched now stood toe-to-toe with the mighty Cyros. Human tactics, honed in the fires of desperation, adapted quickly to the new technology, allowing them to outmaneuver the Cyros at every turn. The Etherian energy weapons, which harnessed the power of the very fabric of space, unleashed devastating strikes that ripped through Cyros ships with ease. Each battle, each engagement, showed the Cyros that the tables were turning. Humanity had found its strength, and the Cyros were no longer the unstoppable force they once seemed. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. No longer were the Cyros the unchallenged predators of the galaxy. They were now being hunted by the very species they had once considered weak and inferior. The Courageous, now an awe-inspiring symbol of humanity's defiance, was at the center of this new conflict. Its once dominant enemy, the Cyros flagship, was now a target of vengeance. With its advanced new weaponry, the Courageous destroyed the flagship in a single, blinding blast. The Cyros' pride and power crumbled, and their forces, once united in fear, began to fracture. The humans were no longer fighting for survival, they were fighting to win. But as humanity began to savor the taste of victory, a new, terrifying threat emerged from the shadows. The Cyros, now on the brink of total collapse, called upon their true masters, the overlords. These beings were the true architects of the Cyros Empire, creatures of unimaginable power and malice, who had been watching from afar. The overlords had remained hidden, content to let their Cyros servants do the dirty work, but now, seeing their empire on the verge of destruction, they decided to intervene. A massive invasion force, larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced, surged forth from the depths of space. The overlords were not just warriors, they were conquerors, beings who had long mastered the art of galactic domination. Humanity had barely begun to adjust to their newfound power when the true nature of the war became clear. The fight for survival was far from over. The overlords were coming, and their forces were more terrifying than anything humanity could have imagined. They were not just looking to defeat humanity, they intended to eradicate them, to wipe them from existence as if they had never been. The Etherian technology, powerful as it was, could not prepare the humans for the full force of the Overlord's wrath. In the face of this new threat, humanity found itself standing at the edge of oblivion once more. The Courageous and its fleet were now a beacon of resistance, But even they could not face the full might of the overlords alone. Commander Rowe and Captain Quinn knew that the battle had entered a new phase. The war for the galaxy was no longer just a fight against the Cyros. It was a battle for the survival of the entire human race. The stakes had never been higher. The humans had fought valiantly, but they were now facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The overlords were not just powerful, they were ancient and ruthless, with knowledge and strength that far surpassed anything humanity had ever faced. The fate of the galaxy, the fate of humanity itself, now hung in the balance. Would the ingenuity and determination that had allowed humanity to survive this far be enough to overcome this new, terrifying force? Or would the overlords crush them in a single, unstoppable sweep? As the first wave of the overlords' invasion fleet arrived, the air was thick with tension. The human fleet, battered but resolute, prepared for the battle of their lives. The Etherians, too, stood ready, knowing that the survival of not just humanity but the entire galaxy depended on what happened next. The battles that followed would be like no others, fought not just with weapons, but with everything humanity had learned in their brief time under the tutelage of the Etherians. Strategy, innovation, and the sheer will to survive would be humanity's greatest weapons in the coming war. The question remained, could they hold the line, or would the overlords' overwhelming power prove to be the end of them all? As Commander Rowe stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, looking out at the incoming storm of warships and the blackness of space beyond, he couldn't help but feel a spark of something new, something greater than fear. It was determination. The humans had faced impossible odds before and had come out victorious. The battle for the galaxy had just begun, and this time, humanity was not going to back down. It was time to fight, not just for survival, but for the future of the universe itself. The final battle for the galaxy had arrived. The Cyros overlords, beings of unimaginable power, had gathered their full might, and now humanity's survival hung in the balance. The Etherians had shared their wisdom and advanced technologies, but it was the courage of humanity that would decide the outcome. Under the steady command of Captain Alara Quinn, the Courageous and its newly formed fleet of Etherian-enhanced ships prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. The sheer size of the Overlord fleet was a terrifying sight. Countless ships, each one a towering force of destruction, arrayed against the smaller human fleet. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as the two sides advanced toward each other, the vastness of space their battleground. It was a fight that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The first volleys of energy weapons lit up the blackness of space as the two fleets clashed. The Courageous, now a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit, surged forward, cutting through the enemy ranks with precision and ferocity. The new fleet, empowered with Etherian technology, was quick and nimble, turning the tide of battle with their advanced weapons and clever tactics. Commander Alex Rowe, a master tactician, used the chaos of the battle to his advantage. His strategies outwitted the Overlord's advanced AI, allowing the human fleet to gain ground. Every maneuver, every shot was carefully calculated, each one a reminder of humanity's resourcefulness. The Overlords had underestimated the human will to fight, and now they were beginning to feel the weight of that mistake. But as the battle raged on, the Cyros revealed their ultimate weapon, a black hole generator, a monstrous device capable of consuming entire star systems. The weapon was as dangerous as it was terrifying, a tool of mass destruction that could not only obliterate the human fleet, but also wipe out the entire sector of space. The Overlords had kept this weapon hidden until now, and as the device activated, the gravitational pull of the black hole began to distort the fabric of space itself. Stars flickered and dimmed, and the very fabric of reality seemed to bend under its power. Time was running out. Humanity was on the verge of defeat. Captain Quinn's voice rang through the comms, firm and resolute. "We can't let it activate. If that thing goes off, we'll all be dead. We have to destroy it." Her plan was simple but incredibly dangerous. The Courageous, with its enhanced weapons and the full might of humanity's fleet, would be the spearhead of this final assault. But there was no guarantee they would survive. It would take everything they had, everything they were willing to give, to destroy the black hole generator before it consumed everything in its path. Commander Rowe, understanding the gravity of the situation, nodded grimly. We either win today, or we die trying. With the overlords watching, and the Cyros forces ready to defend the weapon at all costs, the human fleet made its final charge toward the black hole generator. The Courageous led the charge, firing its advanced energy weapons at the heart of the Cyros defenses, creating openings in their lines. As they neared the black hole generator, the reality of the sacrifice that would be required began to settle in. They were running out of time. The pull of the black hole was growing stronger, threatening to tear them apart. Then, with one final, desperate push, Captain Quinn gave the order to attack. The Courageous and its fleet dove straight into the heart of the Overlord's formation, cutting through the enemy defenses with everything they had. As the Courageous neared the black hole generator, Captain Quinn and her crew knew what had to be done. They had to destroy the weapon, even if it meant sacrificing themselves in the process. The ship was already damaged, the hull cracked and smoking, but they pressed on. With a mighty surge of power, the Courageous unleashed a final, devastating blast, directly hitting the heart of the black hole generator. The explosion was catastrophic, sending a shockwave of energy through the battlefield. The weapon's core imploded, and the black hole generator collapsed in on itself, vanishing into nothingness. But the destruction of the weapon came at a terrible price. The force of the explosion sent shockwaves through space, and the Courageous and its fleet were caught in the blast. Ships were torn apart, their structures buckling under the pressure. The surviving ships, battered and broken, managed to make a desperate escape, using the last of their power to flee the collapsing battlefield. The Overlord's fleet, once so confident in their victory, was thrown into disarray. Their ultimate weapon had been destroyed, and with it, the core of their strength. The Cyros, shattered by the loss of their weapon and the destruction of their leadership, began to retreat in chaos. As the final remnants of the battle faded into the distance, the human fleet, though battered and bruised, stood victorious. The Cyros had been defeated, and the Overlords, though not completely broken, had learned a harsh lesson. Humanity had proven that they were not easily conquered, that no matter the odds, they would fight until the very end. For the first time, the Overlords began to reconsider their approach. The humans had shown resilience that could not be ignored, and their ability to adapt and fight had earned them a measure of respect. In the cold void of space, whispers of peace began to circulate, an impossible thought just days before, but one that now seemed a little more likely. As the surviving human ships limped back to safety, the toll of the battle was clear. The war was far from over, but the future was no longer so bleak. Humanity had proven that they would always fight, that they would never surrender. And in doing so, they had forever changed the balance of power in the galaxy. With the Courageous and its fleet standing tall, humanity had not only survived, but had gained the respect of the very powers that had once sought to destroy them. The war was over, for now. But the road ahead would be uncertain, and the galaxy's future, though brighter than it had been in years, was still fragile. Captain Quinn, her face wary but resolute, watched the stars ahead. The cost had been great, but the victory was theirs. Humanity had proved something far more important than survival. They had proved their place in the galaxy. And no matter what the future held, they would stand tall, ready to face whatever came next. For they were humans, and they would never give up.